Every book has a moment before the page. A decision, a risk, a story worth telling. This is Authors After Action. Conversations with authors about the journey, the work, and the lessons learned along the way.
Do anything there.
Well, no. Well, welcome everybody to Authors After Action. I'm Don, and today's guest, Miss Allison Geeson. Yeah, I'm sorry. It's been a long day. She is a sailor, author who left life on New Jersey horse farm to sail the world. This is going to be an interesting story, guys. Has traveled through 46 countries across 4 continents by sea, writes fiction, nonfiction, and children's stories inspired by real voyages, blends adventure, spirituality, and human connection in her storytelling. Former educator and farm owner with a grounded, relatable voice, brings live stories from storms, cultures, and self-discovery on the open water. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm sorry. That's a real mouthful, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, you know, I think my day started somewhere around 8 this morning, so I'm getting on the tired side, but it's all right. So why don't we dig into a little bit about how did you guys go from owning a horse farm to chasing seahorses?
That's a good question.
Sure.
I did take up sailing in college.
Okay.
And I always had horses. I never lived my life without horses until we actually got on this boat. And I happened to go to the coast of North Carolina to be in a sailboat race because my mom was a competitive avid sailing racer. And my cousin happened to bring down his buddy from the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard, a marine engineer, former merchant marine, and a 3-time national dinghy champion. And he brought him down to be a ringer on my mom's boat for this big regatta. So we met that weekend. I went to school in Charlotte. And it was a 3-day long weekend. And we sailed, we windsurfed, we scuba dived. We just did all kinds of really fun things together. And we really knew we connected. So we were having the last beer at a bar before he went back to Philly and I went back to Charlotte. And he goes, you know, my biggest dream is to sail around the world someday. I said, mine too. Let's get married. So he proposed 4 days later. And we were married less than a year later. And as soon as we were married, we had to move back up to where he lives because he had the job. And I still had my horses. So he built me a horse farm. And then 30 years later, our last of our 3 children got married. And he said, it's time. So we packed up everything, sold the farm, bought our boat, and here we are.
Wow. You know, my hat's off to you because so many people say that's what they want to do is they want to travel, but very few people actually do it. So my hat's off to you guys. It sounds like, man, there's just so many dangers out there that now weather. I mean, I used to own a trucking company, so I can relate a little bit to, you know, you always watch the weather and see where you're going and what's coming. But now it's extremely important for you guys being out there and traveling through all these continents. Man, I bet you guys have seen some amazing stuff.
Yeah, we really have. I never knew everything that we would see and encounter. I mean, there's just no way to know. Like, I can't even begin to describe it to you. And the best I can do is write my books, and then you kind of get a feel for it. And I also have a travel blog. So that does kind of chronicle the adventures and the things we see and the things we go through.
Yeah, 100%. So before we dive into your book, I got to ask, what is one of the best things about giving up life on land to sail? What is the one thing that you've loved so much about it?
The coolest thing about it is when you live on land, your life is so diversified. I mean, you've got bills, you've got cars, you've got jobs, you've got all this thing to worry about, and so many pressures from your society and culture and your neighborhood and whatever. When you live on a boat, your world narrows down to just survival.
Yeah.
That's it. I still talk to my kids and my grandkids by phone and my mom and stuff. But basically every day is about where are we going and how are we getting there? And it's just such a different feeling. you feel like you're really living life, like you're not living for other people or other things. And the people that you meet, because everywhere you go and you're in a harbor, you meet new and wonderful friends and you talk to people and they're all like-minded. They have the same goals. So
Yeah.
you make friends on a level that you've never made before. And it's just a very simple and very meaningful way to live.
I think my audience is going to completely understand with what you said. It's funny the way you put that, because being a military veteran, everybody always asks, why is it that veterans, if they had such a traumatic event over there deployed, why do they all say they would go back? And my best answer is because it's simple. It's, you don't have any of that rat race. It's wake up, do your job, stay alive, eat dinner, wash, rinse, repeat. That's it.
Mhm. Well,
And with
thank
what
you
you
for your
said, that's
service,
perfect.
by the way.
I appreciate that. And it actually works very well with what you said. So that's perfect.
Well,
So
good.
where did writing come from? I mean, have you always been writing, or was it inspired by the new chapter in your guys' life?
I was an English major in college, and I wanted to be a
Okay.
journalist. And
Okay.
it's absolutely impossible for me because I didn't have any resources. My parents were retired and they lived far away. Um, I had no resources to get me a start in a career,
Hmm.
and I just kind of gave up on it. And then I got married right away. So what I did is I became a school teacher and I taught English. And I started in high school and I hated it because all the kids walked into the classroom not wanting to be there. And it was very disheartening. So I
Yep.
started teaching elementary children and my expertise was writer's workshop. I made children love to write. I taught them how it's totally a freedom of expression. It's, a place for your imagination to take off and create wonderful things.
Yeah.
Um, and then I wrote my first book way back in the 70s. And then from there, that was a fiction book. And then I wrote a nonfiction book about one of my horses that fell in the lake and had to be rescued. And he has his own Animal Planet episodes and everything. And then my writing, when I um, came on board, just absolutely took off because now I have all the time in the world.
Yeah. You know, I was just sitting here thinking about when I was going through school, and I'll take combat any day of the week, because I just could not do other people's kids and the way some of the kids are in today's world. I think you made the right choice going down to the elementary level, because it's the high school, upper middle school and high school age when it's like they've set their ways, and they either enjoy it or they don't.
Well, and the problem was I was working in low income districts, and by the time
Yeah.
they were doing junior and senior English in high school, they hated it and they didn't want to be there.
Yeah.
And I got threatened, I got pinned up against a wall after class, and like really bad things happened to me that made me really not want to be there. So,
Yeah.
if I had gotten them at an early age and had them all the way up, I could have done things with them, inspired
Yeah.
them, made them feel differently.
Yep.
But I couldn't cut it.
Yeah. No, I couldn't either. So I agree. When you first started writing, um, and I always ask this in just about all my episodes, because it was so important to me, and luckily I'm just not smart enough to give up. So I I struggled because I didn't know what I didn't know when I wrote my first book. Um, I didn't plan it. There was no outline, because it was about me. It was my life story, and I didn't realize that it's better to just write the story, because you are going to still have to reread it 10 times when you go through the editing process. So I was that guy that wrote a couple pages, went back and edited, wrote a couple pages, went back and edited. And by chapter 5, I realized that I had to change chapter 1 or 2 because the flow didn't go through no more. And it just made the process miserable, because now I'm taking the one part that I think all authors love, and that's the creativity side, and I'm mixing it with the part that the majority of them are not excited for, and that's the editing side, and it just sucked the fun out of it.
Right.
Luckily, I earned that. I learned that before the next book, and I've now published, I don't know, 4 or 5 books, but at the end of the day, I love writing. So what was it? Were some of the things that you didn't know to ask or learn before you started?
Let's see, that's a tough question because I've never really had any roadblocks.
Okay.
I had good foundations in writing in general.
Yeah.
However, I'm very unconventional in the way that I write, that I too do not have an outline. I wrote a book, just published a book a few months ago called The Seven, and it's fictional, but it's from 7 different people around the world, and it dives into their cultures and their histories, and that part I had to research. But the
Mm-hmm.
storyline, it was like a movie playing in my head. I would sit down and I would start writing this person's story, and I'd just be like totally enthralled and like, oh my God, this is happening, really? And like, and even when the 7 stories came together and the culminating ending came up, I had no preconception about how the story was even going to end.
Yeah.
And by the time I got to it, I was like blown away, and I'm crying, and the tears are rolling down my face, and I'm like, oh, I can't believe this, and this is amazing. And I do have to say it's probably divinely inspired because um, it just came out so incredible, and I can't believe that all came out of my head. So um, I never stop learning. I mean, there's a huge difference between writing fiction and nonfiction, which I've done
Yeah.
both, and then my children's stories. Um, I'm just starting my sequel to Sienna, which is a mermaid book, but it has all real sea creatures because I love scuba diving, and I have to somehow get all that stuff in there.
Yeah.
And so I've never written it. Well, I have written a sequel. I can't even say that because I wrote Writing the Ways of Reality 1. I just published Writing the Ways of Reality 2, but now I'm doing a children's book series. So I'm all over the place. I'm very ADD, and I have no rhyme or reason when I write. I wish I could be more helpful on that part.
No, I think it's perfect because, again, it's going to cross over into one of the topics that we're going to get into, and that's about authenticity. And, if you change who you are, it shows in your writing, and your readers and your followers are going to learn. And that's the truth for podcasting or anything. A solid foundation starts with passion, and you have to enjoy what you're creating and the content that you're writing or talking about. And if you don't, you're not going to make it through the hard parts, because
Right.
it'll become a chore the whole time. Before we dive into that part though, I want to ask, how is it that when you start writing fiction and nonfiction, like you said, are just completely different? And most of my books are nonfiction. I write a lot about mental health and that type of stuff. But I did write one fiction book that I used to try to teach people a little bit about what depression and PTSD looks like if it had a physical form.
Okay.
When you write, what are the big differences that you noticed when you go from writing a nonfiction book to a fiction book?
I stress more about the fiction because my nonfiction, I'm just telling my story or telling
Right.
events that happen. Um, with fiction, even though I try to like have preconceptions of concepts I want to work towards, it still comes down that when I start typing, it takes off without me anyway.
Yeah.
So it's still a story. And even though I didn't live it, it's playing in my head like a movie.
Yep.
But I do go back and do more editing on the nonfiction to make sure that there are certain, things are parallel and things make
Yep.
sense, and that there are a lot of literary devices and things like that in there because I have teachers' manuals to go with my children's stories. So
Yep.
I would guess I try to be more worried about the technical aspect of it than I do my nonfiction.
Yeah. I think for me, with the nonfiction, the biggest problem I found was catching myself going too long about something that doesn't have the importance of the book, right? And it's because maybe it was a memory or something that stuck in my head that felt important to me, but it doesn't cross over to the reader because they weren't there for that moment anyway, so they didn't
Right.
experience it, and it doesn't really pertain to my life story. And the other side of that house was with fiction. The part that I struggled with was I'm very attention to detail, and maybe that's from all the years in the military. I don't know, but I like when I write to know how that person is and the word choices they would use, making sure that if I'm writing about a person that's up north, they're not talking like somebody from Georgia, and
Right.
using that proper thing. I like to be able to sense, smell, and I spent a lot of time on that. And what I learned for me, I had to do was basically write a little story about each character that I could go back and refer to and say, oh, yeah, no, that guy wouldn't have done it that way. He would have done it this way. And it was fun because by the time I started the story, I had no clue what the ending was. I mean, I got to learn what the ending was going to be too, because I didn't know when I started it out how I was going to get there or any of that stuff. And to me, that
That's
was the
fun.
biggest difference. Yeah. That's the fun part about it is just because you're the author doesn't mean that you're just holding to the steering wheel. You don't know what's going to be between you and the destination. So,
That's right.
yeah. When you write, a lot of writers, and even myself, you just can't just decide, okay, this is going to be a 9 to 5 job. I'm going to write at 9 o'clock in the morning and I get off at 5. It just doesn't work that way, right? You have to have that sense of feeling to want to create and write. Otherwise, it does affect the vibe that's on the story. What are some of the things that you do? A lot of writers are very schedule based. They like to have their morning tea or morning coffee, then start writing, then take a nap, or whatever. They have their routines.
Unfortunately, routine is not part of my vocabulary because we might be stuck someplace for 3 months, and we might be heading off to a new port every other day.
Yeah.
So it depends what country we're in, what sea we're crossing. Um, I do not have the luxury of having a routine, and even
Yeah.
if I did, I cannot write or type work on my computer if it's too rough out. And we
Okay.
happen to be in a really rough harbor right now, and it could be just calm like this 1 minute, and then we could be just rolling like this the other. And so I kind of have to base my schedule on when I'm feeling good and there's not too much movement. And yeah, it's what state we're in at the moment that I have to do my writing.
Yeah. Have you found that to be difficult from when you was writing before the sailing?
Not really, because being that I lived on a farm and I had such activity going on at my house all the time because I had this writing program, and people would call up and ask me for private lessons, either in the morning or the afternoon. Like, I was always disrupted there. I had goats I had to milk, and things going on, and so I was not very routine oriented back then either. I think I wrote
Okay.
three books before I left, 4 books before I left. So
Okay.
and then 4 since I've been out. So as far as my schedule, that really hasn't changed. I really don't have one.
Okay. Yeah, it's everybody, that's the cool part about being creative is everybody does what works for them. And
Mhm.
that controlled chaos that you're talking about is your superpower to where somebody else that may not work for them.
Yep, might drive them
Well,
crazy.
yeah, maybe, you know. So when you are writing, what is your preferred, is it if you had to pick a one genre, do you prefer fiction, nonfiction, children's books, mysteries? What is it that you just absolutely love writing about?
Oh, I don't know. I don't honestly love one more than the other. I wish I could honestly have an opinion on that, but every book that I've written, I've enjoyed immensely. Whether
It,
I'm just recalling the stories of where we've been and what we've done, or I'm coming up with a new story for a child, or I loved writing the 7. That was magical. I mean, that was because I learned so much myself when I was doing all the research about these cultures in different parts of the world.
yeah.
So I love them all equally.
Okay. What is the latest book that you just released, or do you have a project that you're starting now?
I am working right now on the sequel to my mermaid child's book. It was about a female mermaid named Sienna, and my next one is about a boy mermaid, or merkid, I call him, merperson, Marlin. And that hopefully will be a whole series of books. but it's going to tie in a lot of environmental issues and sea life and teach children about moon cycles and tides and currents and all that kind of stuff. And I'm kind of excited about that because I've heard from people who produce curriculum that there's very little out there to teach kids about those types of things, about weather patterns and about cycles of the moon and what the ocean does. And I mean, I'm still learning facts about the ocean. It's huge. It's just an incredible place to be.
Yeah.
And so if I could share some of that to a child through a fiction book, that would be great.
I never thought of it that way. When I was in elementary school, 5th, 6th grade, that age, we lived in California, and every year that school always did at the 6th grade level, they went and did science camp. And that was a big part of my life. It's one of the few things that I remember all the way back from as a child. And, I still remember every class, every 6th grade class picked a different sea creature to learn about, but we never did. They talked about tide as far as how it comes in and how it goes out and the moon's gravity that causes it and so forth. But they never talked about any of that other stuff that you were talking about. You're absolutely right. The weather, none of that stuff. And
Well,
I still remember for us, my animal was a hermit crab. And the one thing that still sticks in my mind was when we first found one. The tide was out and there was all these little tide pools. And the teacher told us, he said, okay, you guys might want to put it back in the water now. And we said it was trying to get out of this little tide pool, and we put it back down, and this octopus came out and grabbed a hold of it.
No.
I was like, well, we get one animal to study and we killed it.
Well, you didn't kill it technically. Octopus
Right.
had a snack.
You're right. But it was pretty cool. We got to see how the ink comes out on an octopus and it takes off, and it was really cool. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. What was you saying?
Oh, no, that's all right. I was interrupting you. We learned a ton crossing the Pacific Ocean because there are like 5 currents that converge, and what happens when you cross the equator and all this stuff, and being in the Galapagos Islands, which is so affected by the currents and things. So, if I'm still learning things and I do this, there's so much that could be presented for kids to learn and to just advance their knowledge about, because this ocean takes up 80% of our planet and kids know so little about it.
Yeah. I was just thinking that when you said that, it's funny, the thing that is the largest thing on our planet, we know the least amount about.
Yep.
Yeah, it is very interesting. So do you do your own artwork with the children's book too, or do you have somebody that does the art for you?
The first book I did is about the sport that I taught. It's called equestrian vaulting, which is gymnastics on horse.
Okay.
And I actually took real photos and turned them into, on the computer, you can turn them into looking like pencil drawings.
Yep.
So they were my actual illustrations. And then Sienna was the first book that I actually paid to have an illustrator. And the funny part was, after I wrote the book, I was stressing about the illustrations, and I was on Facebook and I saw a post from somebody that we had met in Africa. We were in Tangiers, I believe. And it was the only other American boat in the harbor, and they were right next to us. And we spent a few days walking around Tangiers and getting to know them. And then we went our separate ways. And then I see this Facebook post from her, and she had this beautiful illustration. She's, I just finished illustrating this children's book, and here's an example. And I went, oh my gosh, you are amazing. And I said, Barbara, would you be interested in illustrating my mermaid book? And she goes, well, send me the manuscript. So I sent it to her, and she goes, I absolutely love this story. I want to illustrate it. Turns out it wasn't the Barbara I thought it was. It was some lady in England. And why she was on my Facebook group, I don't know, because I didn't have anything on there about illustrating children's books. And it was somebody I don't know. And she was like a 6-time international award-winning illustrator. And she only takes like 3 books a year. And she loved mine so much that she said, I absolutely want to illustrate this. And so it ended up costing me a lot of money, but it was worth it because her illustrations are absolutely beautiful.
Yeah. That's the universe speaking to you right there. That's what that is.
Yes, it is.
Absolutely. So I know you are out there and in the deep blue, but do you self publish, or are you going through an actual publishing company?
I've tried, but my skills in marketing my books are not as good as my writing abilities, unfortunately. So, um, I sent queries for all my books and never got any bites, but I did get the 7 published with a partner publishing company called Defiance Press. So
Hmm.
that one is with Defiance. And then I'm just self-publishing on Amazon and Goodreads and Kindle and all those other platforms.
Yep. It sounds like we're talking about the same here too, because I do the same thing. I self-publish as well. I'm not the, other than podcasting, I pretty much stick around my house and keep to myself. So that whole getting out there and marketing and stuff, I'm not good at that either. So, but
I
I'm good
just
with,
did when I went back to the US this time, I did do several book signings and author events, and I had all my books there, so that was kind of fun. But we're not back very often, so that's
yeah,
really not even a possibility most of the time.
yeah, yeah. So how is it that, do you have a website that people can come to get your books, or is it just through Amazon and through Barnes and Nobles and those kind of places?
I actually have an author website. It's AlisonGeishan.com,
Okay.
and that has all my books listed. And as far as my book, The Seven, I have a story behind the story for each of the 7 characters, because every character in the book, either the location or the person, has like a special meaning to me, or
Okay.
is somebody that I knew. So I go into, the whole story behind that. And also the 7 breeds of horses, I go into their history. So they learn about the history of the horse that the person has an encounter with and where that person came from.
Awesome. Yeah. And they can get all that too on your website as well?
Yes,
Awesome.
on my author website. Yep. And then our sailing blog is just stories and photos. I love taking pictures. I take hundreds of pictures of everything. So, and when like we go scuba diving, I do underwater filming and everything. So, sailmates.org is where all my blog posts are.
Cellmates.org. Okay. I will make sure that we get all these links put in the description, make it easy for people to get there and purchase your books and obviously definitely keep up with all your new adventures and everything that you're doing. So I think a lot of people are going to enjoy that. If
That'd be
if you
awesome.
Yeah, if you could give a young author just a bit of advice from your expertise, what is it that you would tell them and share with them?
I would say definitely write something you're passionate about, because if it doesn't thrill you when you just start thinking about writing it, you're going to struggle.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, even if you think that you want to write something, but you're passionate about something else and you're putting on the back burner thinking, well, maybe I'll write about that someday, but today I need to write about this. Don't do that,
Yep.
because there's no sense in struggling. When you hit what you really are passionate about, the ideas and the thoughts and the words flow.
Yep.
And so that would be my one piece of advice.
I agree. And everybody says that, why can't I have a job that I just absolutely love? And if you want to become an author, then you need to be passionate about what you're writing about, and then you can have a job that you really love. So I
Absolutely.
I agree 100%. Well, I'm so happy to have had you on. I had a great time. I can't wait to go check out your blog and look at some of the pictures and I will be a subscriber as well and get to see all the cool stuff that you guys are doing. So
Well, thank you. We love
yeah,
having people comment and say, it's ask questions about where we are and what they want to know, and because it's all fascinating, it's all a learning experience for us as well.
yeah,
So each new country we get to, and just being here in the French islands of the French Polynesia, where there are no grocery stores and hardly any food, and it's a totally different way of life, and there are sharks waiting to eat you when you get out of your dinghy if you fall in the water. It's yeah, definitely an adventure.
well, at least there's big fish to eat around
Yeah.
in that area as well. All right. Well, I'm glad you came on. I hope all of you guys that are listening and following us, that you go check out her websites. Make sure you subscribe to her blog and keep up with what's going on. Make sure you go to the website, pick up her books, and check out the amazing work that she's doing. She's not only just writing, but she's teaching. And there's so many times that we have taken our youngins and said, hey, here's a electrical device. Put a book back in their hand and let them read and let their imagination roar as they're following along. So I hope all of y'all have a great day. Don't forget, don't struggle through the day. Pick up a book and read it today. Later.
You've been listening to Authors After Action, a podcast from the Barracks Media Network. Thanks to our guest for sharing their story, and thank you for listening. You can explore more conversations like this across the Barracks Media Network. We'll see you next time.